Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of Indian elections. The Indian electoral process is not just a political event. It's a festival of democracy that involves millions of people from diverse backgrounds coming together to exercise their right to vote. India, the biggest democracy on earth, has a really interesting election system. With over 900 million eligible voters, the scale of elections in India is unparalleled. The sheer logistics of conducting elections in such a vast and diverse country are mind-boggling. Since India became independent in 1947, they've had regular elections, which shows they're serious about democracy. The first general elections were held in 1951 to 52, and they were a monumental task, involving over 173 million voters. For the first 20 years, elections for the parliament and state governments happened at the same time. This simultaneous election system was efficient and helped streamline the electoral process. But this changed because of political reasons, and it got hard to manage. The political landscape in India became more complex, and the synchronization of elections became increasingly difficult. The 1967 elections were a big turning point. For the first time, the ruling party faced significant opposition, leading to a more fragmented political scenario. Some states had to have early elections, which messed up the timing. This led to a situation where different states were holding elections at different times, disrupting the uniformity of the electoral process. Since then, India has had tons of elections, each on its own schedule. This means that at any given time, some part of the country is preparing for or conducting an election. This has led to a never-ending election season, which affects how the government works and how money is spent. The constant cycle of elections means that political parties are always in campaign mode, which can divert attention from governance. While lots of elections are a sign of a healthy democracy, it also causes problems. The frequent elections lead to increased expenditure and can cause voter fatigue. All the campaigning, political stuff, and extra work makes it hard for the government to focus on running the country and making things better. The administrative machinery is often stretched thin, managing both governance and the electoral process. This is why people are talking about one nation, one election. The idea is to synchronize the elections for the parliament and state assemblies to reduce the frequency of elections and the associated costs. Proponents argue that it would lead to better governance and more efficient use of resources. However, there are also challenges and criticisms. Critics argue that it could undermine the federal structure of India and concentrate too much power at the center. They also point out the logistical challenges of conducting simultaneous elections across such a large and diverse country. Despite these challenges, the debate continues. Whether or not one nation, one election becomes a reality, it highlights the ongoing efforts to improve the electoral process in India. The goal is to make elections more efficient while ensuring that the democratic principles are upheld. In conclusion, the history of elections in India is a testament to the country's commitment to democracy. From the first general elections to the ongoing debates about electoral reforms, India continues to evolve and adapt its electoral process to meet the needs of its people. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the history of Indian elections. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insightful content. See you next time. So what is One Nation, One Election, or ONOE? It's a simple idea, having elections for the parliament and all the state governments at the same time every 5 years. The idea is to make India's complicated election system easier and less expensive. People who support ONOE say it will save money, be easier for the government workers, and let the government focus on running the country instead of always campaigning. This idea has become really popular lately, especially with Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his political party, the BJP. They believe ONOE is super important for India to get rid of all these separate elections and have a better system. One of the biggest reasons people like ONOE is that it could make things much more efficient. Having separate elections for parliament and state governments takes a lot of work and money. Think about all the police, the voting ballots. It adds up. Elections at the same time would save a lot of money. The Election Commission of India could make everything simpler, use fewer people, and spend money more wisely. This would free up money for important things like schools, hospitals, and roads. Also, ONOE could reduce problems caused by the Model Code of Conduct, or MCC. The MCC is important for fair elections, but it can slow down important government work. ONOE would mean fewer of these slowdowns, so the government could focus on running the country and planning for the future. Section 4. A fiscally responsible democracy, the economic argument. Saving money for the government isn't the only benefit of ONOE. The One Nation, One Election ONOE policy aims to streamline the electoral process, reducing the frequency of elections and thereby cutting down on the associated costs. This is not just about saving money for the government, but also about creating a more efficient and effective governance system. By having fewer elections, the government can allocate resources more effectively, focusing on development projects and public welfare rather than constantly preparing for the next election. Lots of elections cost a lot of money for political parties, people running for office, and even regular people. Political parties spend enormous amounts on campaigns, from organizing rallies to printing posters and running advertisements. Candidates too have to invest heavily in their campaigns to reach out to voters. This financial burden extends to ordinary citizens who may contribute to campaigns or take time off work to participate in the electoral process. Campaigning means spending tons of money on rallies, ads, and travel. The logistics of running a campaign are complex and costly. Political parties and candidates have to travel extensively to connect with voters across different regions. This involves significant expenses on transportation, accommodation, and event management. Additionally, the cost of media advertisements, both on television and online, adds to the financial strain. With ONOE, campaigns would be much shorter, which means everyone would spend less money. A unified election schedule would lead to a more concentrated and efficient campaign period. Political parties and candidates would be able to plan their strategies better, focusing their resources on a single, well-coordinated campaign. This would not only reduce costs, but also minimize the disruption to daily life caused by prolonged electioneering. This would help political parties and make things fairer for people who don't have a lot of money to spend on campaigning. Smaller parties and independent candidates, who often struggle to compete with well-funded opponents, would benefit from a level playing field. The reduced financial burden would encourage more diverse participation in the political process, fostering a more inclusive democracy. Also, having elections all the time can hurt the economy. Frequent elections create a climate of uncertainty, which can be detrimental to economic stability. Businesses and investors are often hesitant to make long-term commitments during election periods, fearing policy changes and market volatility. This uncertainty can lead to reduced investment and slower economic growth. When people aren't sure what will happen after an election, and with the MCC slowing things down, it can stop people from investing money and slow down how the economy grows. The Model Code of Conduct, MCC, which comes into effect during election periods, restricts government activities and decision-making. While this is essential for ensuring free and fair elections, it can also delay important economic decisions and projects. This slowdown can have a ripple effect on the economy, affecting everything from infrastructure development to job creation. ONOE could make things more stable and predictable, which would encourage people to invest and help the economy grow. A synchronized election schedule would provide a more predictable political environment, reducing the uncertainty that often accompanies frequent elections. This stability would be beneficial for businesses and investors, fostering a more conducive environment for economic growth. With a clear and consistent policy framework, the government can focus on long-term development goals, driving sustained economic progress. Section 5. Navigating the Labyrinth. Challenges to implementation. ONOE sounds good, but making it happen won't be easy. The idea of one nation, one election, ONOE, is appealing in theory, promising streamlined processes and reduced costs. However, the path to implementation is fraught with numerous challenges that need to be carefully navigated. India's constitution, which is a really important document, doesn't allow for elections at the same time right now. The Constitution of India, a robust and comprehensive document, currently mandates separate timelines for national and state elections. This means that any move towards ONOE would require significant constitutional amendments. Changing the constitution is really hard and needs a lot of agreement from politicians, which can be tough in India. The process of amending the constitution is not only lengthy, but also requires a broad consensus among various political parties, which often have divergent interests and priorities. One big problem is figuring out what to do about the current state governments. Each state in India operates on its own electoral cycle, and synchronizing these with the national elections poses a significant logistical challenge. Making all the elections happen at the same time might mean some states have to end their terms early or make them longer, which could cause legal and political problems. Adjusting the terms of state governments to align with a unified election schedule could lead to legal disputes and political unrest, as it may be seen as undermining the democratic process. Also, some people worry that ONOE might give too much power to the national government and not enough to the states. There is a concern that centralizing the election process could shift the balance of power, diminishing the autonomy of state governments and potentially leading to a more centralized form of governance. Elections at the same time might make national issues more important than local issues, which could be a problem for smaller regional political parties. Smaller regional parties fear that their voices might be drowned out by the larger national narratives, making it harder for them to address local issues that are crucial to their constituencies. Additionally, the diversity of India's electorate means that local issues often vary significantly from one region to another. Implementing ONOE could risk oversimplifying these diverse needs and concerns, leading to a one-size-fits-all approach that may not be effective. The logistical challenges of conducting simultaneous elections across such a vast and diverse country cannot be underestimated. From ensuring adequate security to managing the logistics of voting in remote areas, the practicalities of ONOE are daunting. Despite these challenges, the idea of ONOE continues to be a topic of significant debate and discussion. Proponents argue that it could lead to more efficient governance and reduce the frequency of election-related disruptions. However, the road to implementation is long and complex, requiring careful consideration of the myriad challenges involved.